Welcome to SPCs Unleashed. My name's Mark Richards. I'll be your host this evening, and I'm joined by Ali, Hajou, and Stephan Nick. And this week we are exploring relentless improvement. So, in the show today, unfortunately, we miss out on a great story from Nico about taking Swiss banking into the Matrix because he's decided that taking his children to Disney World is more important. But we will hear from Ali about gamifying bug hunts and Stefan about improve to survive. It wouldn't be Stefan if we didn't have a sporting metaphor and something that you could relate back to the army in some fashion. But before we get to the fun stories, just a quick textual overview of the topic. So, relentless improvement is part of the continuous learning culture competency. There are three dimensions in that competency: learning organization, innovation culture, and relentless improvement. And to be honest, if I had my way, I'd put them in the opposite order because I think it all starts with relentless improvement. And then innovation culture and learning organization come out of that for me. But if we kind of drive into the relentless improvement side, you really can't talk about relentless improvement without talking about Toyota. Because every story we have about systematic, relentless striving for improvement kind of happens to be a Toyota story. And Toyota would say that they couldn't talk about it without talking about Dr. Deming and the work that he did in Japanese industry and with Toyota, particularly around helping them to embed the whole plan, do, check, adjust model. And I must confess, every time I look at the PDCA diagram at the moment, I can't escape the knowledge that in his final years, Deming decided to actually reframe it from plan, do, check, adjust to plan, do, study, adjust. And I think it's an interesting tweak to keep in your mind. But the dot points are a constant sense of urgency, and we'll hear a little bit about that in the stories. Problem-solving culture, reflecting and adapting frequently, fact-based improvement, and optimizing the whole. But without further ado, Ali, you had a great story about creativity and improvement.
Yes. And also for me, this core competency and specifically this dimension, more than anything, what I like about it, uh, and what makes it interesting for me is that this specifically it triggers creativity. It triggers creativity in trying to solve an issue, and um, and that creativity, I don't know, it's that's for me the energizer on why at least I have this job, the job in which I dive into agile and work with smart people, because we're trying to search for sometimes unconventional solutions for annoying issues, to become faster or to make work nicer or more effective. And um, I have a more elaborate story, but I'll talk about that in a bit about something that I've encountered at a client where the client was continuously basically everyone the the rat race that happened of you know what we're just busy with delivery, nothing else. We're just busy with delivery. We're not spending any time on improvement. No, it's just delivery. Hence, the story that I'm going to tell in a bit is the really cool and creative way of an entire train, um, essentially installing the IP iteration in a like sort of a creative, unconventional way. What I'm going to talk
So I'm going to just hold you up for a second because you mentioned in your pre-show notes, like people were leaving the organization. They were so depressed about the state of affairs.
about. Oh yes. So I mean, the situation there was dire. Let me just call it like that. We're just busy with delivery and delivery. There's the issues. Some of the issues that they had was lack of motivation because you're just busy with um, uh, with uh, with deliverables. Um, the lack of motivation generated a retention issue. People left. Can't, it, Work is not fun anymore. We can't. we improve ourselves, um, pressing issues and bugs and that have been around forever. They were extremely annoying. Could not be solved. Why? Because it was not plannable, or at least it was not allowed to spend time on it. And yeah, we've uh, so we saw that that was a huge issue, um, and the relentless improvement habit, which was basically sitting down and brainstorming about potential solution and then installing the smallest version of that, was what generated really creative alternative.
I'm looking
So
forward to hearing the rest of that story.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
really.
so over to you, Stefan. Somehow or other, we've managed to bring Elon Musk into relentless improvement.
Yeah, let's start with my story. About 15 years ago, I'm 176 tall, so 1 meter 76 centimeters. I had over 80 kilograms. I didn't look fit. I didn't look good. I even did tested myself, and I thought about how do you get better? How do you get back into shape? And I was interested in what are those principles getting fit again, having my body in good shape, not only after reaching that state, kind of keeping it, evolving it, and also getting into a state where you really enjoy training. You don't do training for the sake of losing weight and getting fit again. It's even more than that. And that really, yeah, it followed me the last 15 years for my personal life. And I could adapt so many things into my professional life. And when I tackled this dimension, relentless improvement, I was astonished. Every topic I touched, every article I read, it's somewhere related to relentless improvement. It's not a status quo. It's not you're here and then you are there. There's the way between A to B. And that's the fun part. That's the interesting part. That's my story. That's how I would initiate.
So let's give it a little bit of context. And I can't talk about relentless improvement without thinking back to 2019 when I did my lean study tour in Japan. And the first factory we visited was the Toyota Hiace factory. And we walked in the door and they said, "Welcome to our factory. This is the worst you're ever going to see it. Tomorrow will be better." And the entirety of the way through that lean study tour was just an unbelievable fixation on improvement. And, we had a speech about what like great leadership looked like. And this is where, I was very sad we haven't got Nico here tonight because he loves the word ruthless rather than relentless. And I've got to be honest, if I think about some of what I heard from the Toyota folks, ruthless is probably a pretty good word for it. Because we had a speech from a guy who'd actually managed that plant for many years before he started teaching on these study tours. And he was talking about leadership, and he said, actually, one of the critical things you've got to do as a leader is to instill that sense of urgency in your people. And, part of the reason you walk the floor is so you can see the problems and the opportunities. And then you wait to see if they talk to you about the problems and the opportunities. And you just got to make it clear to them that they have to pay attention to it or they're not doing their job as leaders. And, he went on to say, look, it's the focus you have on improvement in the good times that sets you up to survive the bad times. And too many people just wait to start trying to improve when it's bad, as opposed to recognizing when it's good is the opportunity to find focus. And if you kind of bring that across to, what we do in our world with lean and agile, I think there's a truth and there's a bunch of quotes out there around it. But the truth is lean and agile don't solve your problems. They bring them into focus. The question is, what do you do with those insights? Once you can see your problems, are you going to lean into it? And relentless improvement is the question of how you lean into it. And that's what controls your destination. Lean, agile, safe, other frameworks, they're the beginning. They help you start to see, and then relentless improvements, what you do with what you see. And it's not a team thing, it's not a train thing, it's not a portfolio thing. It's every aspect of your organization. Now, of course, most of us, when we think about improvement, have stories that originate in the kind of team and art type context, because that's where a lot of it begins. And on that note, why don't we throw across to Stephan and leaving your comfort zone? Tell us more.
Yep, I'm picking up the thread you mentioned before. Relentless improvement or improvement per se should be obvious. Why isn't it? Why are we first of all talking about leaving the comfort zone and spending so much time about, oh yeah, it's cozy now, that's where we are. You said the objective or the goals should be the drivers, that you don't talk about your comfort zone, you talk about constant change, right? Being aware, yes, I'm overweight. That's 10 seconds of a statement. And from then on, it's how do I get fit, right? And not, oh, it's cozy in bed. I should get up at 6 and do some training. Just do it, right? And from then on, it becomes really interesting understanding what could help you to get better over the time. Do I understand why I have to improve? What kind of means or principles I'm adapting, I'm applying to the state where I am. And I don't know how it is in Australia or in the world. In Germany and in Switzerland, we talk so much about the comfort zone, right? We shouldn't do that. We should be goal oriented, and we should talk about, okay, let's go, let's move, right? And while you move, you get better. But you have to be aware, if you start somewhere and you have been so deep in the comfort zone, it takes a certain time where you need structured advice, where you sometimes even need a structured program, like a training program, that forces you to do stuff, although you don't like to do it at the moment. And at a given time, you overcome this comfiness, and then you start really engaging in how you get better, and it really becomes this second nature. It becomes your DNA, right? And I see that in sports. I see that in team empowerment. At the beginning, it's kind of shaky. It's hard to do. You need a lot of coaching. You need a lot of attention. But at a given time, you almost have to hold back people, right? Because you can train the wrong way if you apply the wrong triggers, the wrong methods and schemes. You might even overtrain and go the other way. So that's something that really drives me. And at the moment, in certain aspects, when I talk to teams or when I talk to value streams or even management, we're not talking anymore about the comfort zone. It's more about, okay, there's the goal, and what kind of tactics or strategy are we applying to get better?
So if I kind of play back, I've heard you talk about, recognize you're in the comfort zone, desire to get out, and then look for help, right? Guidance, tools, approaches that are going to help you start to move. And, we start personal and then we've started to move more into a company setting. If you think about improvement at different levels of scale, right? There's personal improvement, there's team improvement, there's art improvement, there's portfolio improvement. What do you find as a SPC in terms of the differences in the approach you take to getting that mobilization and early momentum when you think about the different levels of scale?
Yeah, let me use that analogy of a toolbox, right? If I only look at my toolbox, I just grab a tool and I do something. For me, at any abstraction layer or level, context is key, right? What's the context? Knowing where was the past, where are we heading to? And that might be totally different on a team level, where you initially have to push some people, not pull. You really have to push them to get out of the comfort zone. some teams are already kind of high performing. They have this intrinsic motivation to do it themselves. You only kind of, I'm using the word interfere if you see that the high performance could drop or you couldn't hold it. So setting some signposts, but they decide again, okay, are we going more left, straight ahead, or right? Because the signposts would lead us towards our goal, our objective. So context for me is one thing. And the other thing is, I, as a coach, I have to be very careful not to cover or to dig holes. People jump into it, think that's the right thing. They don't leave the holes anymore, right? So for me, as a coach, I always try to perceive the situation. Are people self-motivated, intrinsically motivated to do it? That's in sports as well. Some, they do it because they study training plans, they study principles, and they do it. They can get up at 5 a.m, they do a training hour, then they go to work. Others, you have to call them and you have to say, hey, we are a training group at 5. I'm at your door. I'm knocking at the door. If you don't open, I'm not your friend anymore, right?
Cool. So understand context, understand how they're wired and what kind of levers you need to pull. Definitely deals with different people as well as different levels of scale. Make sure you don't point them towards the wrong hole when they can't get out of. I like that. Anything else you think about when you think about different levels of scale and relevance?
I
I'll
think
let
I
you
have
jump
one.
in.
Something that I like, which also comes from the way of working that we train, is the rhythmic approach to improvement. In a way, forcing yourself to take a moment, a breather, to um, do nothing else other than improve.
Yeah.
Having to spend time to improve. There's this statement, I've added a little screenshot of that in our Miro board. There's a quote from Ken Schwaber that I also always use from in my trainings, which is that Scrum, and actually if you'd cross out Scrum and you replace that with agile, the statement will still stay. But the quote is, Scrum is like your mother-in-law. It will point out at all of your faults. And that's exactly what it is. It is the iterative approach. Um, you know, we made an agreement 2 weeks. Would have a moment to sit down and look at the data and understand what we are going to improve because we booked the time anyway. The same applies on a larger scale, on a biweekly, frequency, or once a quarter. We will sit together with all of us to look at potential improvements. That's not based on data. We're going to look at so in a way, the rhythmic approach. So another words, the iterative approach um, allows us to, yeah, force ourselves in this uncomfortable situation and sort of take ourselves out of the, you know what, I'm just busy doing my work, leave me alone kind of habit, um, and sit together to look at data, trying to figure out how we can improve and what we are going to do. So in a way, it becomes a little bit of a forcing function, and I think somehow I do like that. Just if eventually it becomes a rhythm, you get used to it, but you're forcing yourself to take a moment to improve it. There's one more analogy that I would like to make over here, which was something that I read a long time ago. Actually, it started from a podcast that I heard, which was about it was also about weight getting out of control. This was in a state penitentiary in somewhere in the U.S. Where um, people got out of shape more and more and more and more. And what happened? Even though the uh, the call it the diet options, so the food options in the kitchens, whereas slowly over time they try to have more healthier options in the kitchen. People still, let's say, yeah, overall still increase their weight. The yeah, people still increase the inmates. They still what happened? What they took something out of the system, which was that the inmates were not allowed to wear a belt because a belt can be used for all kind of things. I don't know, but the belt actually acted as a sort of um, a guardrail
It's
in a way.
like a feedback
You would
system for them,
feel
right?
like a feedback system. Indeed, you
Yeah.
could feel that you're getting out of shape, or you could feel that the belt would getting tighter. Um, and the moment that they took that out because of all kind of other reasons, uh, people had less of a feedback loop, less of an improvement cycle.
So we're in root
So
cause
it's
analysis mode now,
sort of, yes.
right?
That's
I
I,
cool.
like that story a lot.
I wanted
Mark,
to,
may I add something to Ali's rhythm and cadence, right?
yeah,
And I really like sports training philosophy and theory.
really?
There you have macros, yeah, you have macro cycles and microcycles.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to stick with a topic for a longer time, knowing that it will get hard. It doesn't change within the rhythm or cadence, right?
Yeah.
You need multiple rhythms, multiple cadences to achieve that. To stick with the goal, you need data. You stand on the balance and you see, okay, on the scales, and you see it's getting better, right? And I can take off the belt, and my trousers are not falling down. So macro cycles, microcycles help me a lot. And what I see quite often in coaching, teams sitting down, doing their retrospective in a mechanical way, and pulling them out and say, guys, what are we talking about? Is it more a topic that lingers around for a longer time? We don't see any improvement. How will we improve the situation for us? Let's get data in. Let's talk about data. Or is it a quick win? How do we achieve that? Let's not talk about data. Let's do it immediately, then see what happens, and then sustain the victory over a certain time and bake it in, right? So relentless improvement is not a single thread. It has lots of oscillations. And again, regarding the context, well, it helps me quite a lot because you asked, Mark, in what context would I do what as a coach or as an SPC? I need to understand where they are. Is it a topic that is lingering around for a long time, where I can help, or is it more on a microcycle where you have the next growth spurt coming into a new level and then sustaining?
Okay, so we've got context, we've got rhythm, we've got feedback loops. In actual fact, we could sit in that for a long time because I think there's an accountability lens to rhythm as well. But just before we jump across to Ali's story, one more question for you, Stephan. As a coach, your job's not so much to achieve relentless improvement as to inspire and equip. And I'm sure I don't think there's any coach who's honest who doesn't say they've had scenarios where they really struggled to get relentless improvement moving. If you look back across your career coaching and you say, where were your aha moments? If you pick one or two moments where you went, I now have some really great new tools in my toolkit for helping to mobilize relentless improvement. What would those one or two moments be?
Very good question. Let me dig into my memory. First of all, as a young coach, I did a lot of stuff where I wasn't aware of what I was doing. I just did it from my guts feeling. And what I had to learn to dig deep and find out what are the principles behind my behavior, what I said, what I did. So my learning curve had to be steep. So being ahead was one of my goals. Sometimes I didn't have this occasion. I had to react within the situation. What I learned over the time as well is gut feeling is not a bad thing, because it's your experience over the time accumulated, helping you to decide in a more unconscious way, helping the teams. So I couldn't spit out a specific situation at the moment based on your question, but I guess that's one of the things I really cherish now after a certain time, having this experience, gut feeling, but also knowing behind there are some, as Musk says, first principles, right? Musk companies, they really celebrate what is first principles. Do we boil down to the basics? And from the basics, triggering, like on team level, tell them, look, these are the basics, like in training. What would you pick now to get better over the time? And that's a whole different discussion. Then I'm the coach, I'm coming in, and let's do the boat retrospective. Where's the anchor? Where are the sails? This is the boat. You're deviating away from the core of the problem. And people are doing stuff in a mechanical way. You're just running around the house. That's not training, right? Maybe walking would be better.
Okay, so if I played back what I think I heard you say, there was a piece of that puzzle that said just building self-awareness.
Absolutely.
And then there was another piece of the puzzle which was learning to provide options and allow others to choose rather than trying to choose for them. Would that be a kind of fair playback?
Yeah, exactly. And in coaching, what I've learned as well from pros is sometimes you give advice without explaining why you give that advice. And you state it like that. You tell them, guys, let's do it this way. Let's explore it. Sometimes you first give them the principle and say, okay, why would I coach this way? Or why would I favor this option over that option? Because. But again, it's up to you. You decide. Do you want to get better? Try it.
All right.
I'll be like, I'm Stefan, just follow me.
Well, and kind of transitioning the segue, a few of the books that I read over my Christmas holidays told a lot of stories about people leveraging Toyota consultants in other contexts. And, one of them, of course, was Deming's Journey to Profound Knowledge. And really, these were the disciples of Ono. And they had a reputation for being very harsh. Really harsh. And it was really interesting to read, because, we as coaches, we're all like, softly, softly, understand the context, blah, 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 help people find it themselves. And these guys used to just walk in and call people incompetent, and really just hammer and tongs. But one of the things that numerous people reflected on about working with them was that the Toyota consultants always had a master plan, but they didn't usually share it with the organization. They'd point the organization something and say, we've got to get in there, right? Roll our sleeves up, drag the executives in and make the executives start moving furniture. And the executives would be like, why are we doing this? And part of it was them activating them. But they'd show them the next step of the journey. And it would only be 2, 3, 4 years down the track that they'd realize that from day one, there'd been a master plan sitting in the Toyota guy's head. They just hadn't shared the big picture. They'd only shared the next step. And I think it's probably while I've never walked in and told somebody they're incompetent, we won't talk about inner talk tracks there, but sort of recognizing that idea that says there's always a big picture in your head as a coach, and you're trying to find what's the next thing somebody's ready to see. Because if you tell them the big picture, you can see it can be very scary. However, let's jump. Ali. Gamification.
Yes.
Relentless improvement.
Gamification, yes. So as an SPC, I'm very sure that everyone had this issue, um, which is the selling the IP iteration. What I mean with that is making sure that people, that includes team members, but also all types of management, line management, portfolio management, your product management, to sell them into the idea of the IP iteration. Because wait a second, we have a couple of weeks after a couple of normal sprints in which we're not planning work. Wait a second, so that means that we have a huge amount of people, an entire train, multiple teams that are not going to spend their time and the capacity building stuff? Question mark? Explanation mark? We're not going to do that. So I'm very sure that happens very often. Um, so I was in that situation as well, where there was there was an environment, a train that had kind of a was yeah well no, I'm just going to call it like that, toxic environment where everyone was just being busy delivering. And the people were not necessarily pushed into it. People did that out of their own habit. They really wanted to spend all of their time just in delivery. The people knew that there was a lot of work to do, and they wanted to spend the time to deliver the work. But because of that, there were all kind of issues that was tooling, all kind of bugs that were just tormenting everyone all the time. But because if it was a small bug that was bugging end users and therefore the developers, every now and then, there was always some other work that had more priority, so they would spend their time on that other more priority work, only building up technical debt. And because there was such a huge amount of work, there was a demotivation because those bugs, they kept on piling up. Things became slower and slower and slower and slower. We're not fixing it. The processes that we have were not being fixed. So had was it again one of the issues was that test environments were always in use. And there were very limited test environments. So anyways, that generated a huge amount of pressure. Pressure generated a lack of retention. People left. So it had that domino. It was just really a sort of a death spiral into badness for that train. And all of that still coming from a good place, basically, a good place from people's heart, because they were like, there's so much work to do. We're going to spend time, our time that we have in delivering that work. Um, but the bugs were still being annoying. So rather than having an IP iteration, I thought, you know what, let's have a moment every quarter, every PI, have a moment where we sit together. In the first time that we did it was just with Scrum Masters and the RT. Let's sit together to think about the small little improvements that we can find, that we can probably fix in very short period of time, and just collect them. And we might be able to prioritize them later, but we need to find a way to just think and brainstorm about improvement. So that's what we did. Uh, Took us about an hour or two, I think, the first time, to sit down and just collect all kind of issues that were bugging people in the train. And what happened? Actually, a couple of Scrum Masters were like, "Wait a second, what if we make a game out of it? Well, what if we make a game out of fixing bugs? What does that mean? Making a game out of fixing bugs? Well, we that's what happens with smart people the moment that you're standing in front of a whiteboard, and I was just shutting my mouth, but I had a marker in my hand. I was just jolting down all of the ideas that they came up with, and one thing came after the other. So we're like, wait a second, so what if we make a game out of fixing bugs? We might be able to do that, to allocate 2 hours somewhere to just do that. But then how can we make it nice? How can we make it sort of enticing where, oh yeah, maybe we can find something, an approach where teams can compete with each other. And lo and behold, before we knew it, um, they have created a game that was very much inspired by the game Risk. For anyways, which is like a large board game where your team is sort of trying to conquer the world, um, and take over countries. Well, imagine that each country had a bug. So that means that as a team, you can make a choice of which bug am I going to fix, and you take that bug, and whenever you fix it, that means that you've conquered that um, that country, and that gave the sense of team versus how do you call it, sort of a challenge. And in the end, after the game is done, the team that has conquered the most countries, fixed the most bugs, would win. I don't know exactly what it was anymore. I think it was a very simple sort of a book in the Netherlands, something that is called the Speld. Speld is a sort of a sarcastic view on the news, sort of a realistic but a sarcastic view on the news, and so it's really funny to read. Funny, and that became the prize. So the Scrum Masters were completely energized. Let's do this, and this is fantastic. But then, how can we do it in such a way where it doesn't upset people that are so focused on? No, we need to spend all of our time just in delivery. Well, we can allocate half a day just before PI planning because there's preparation anyway for PI planning. So we can allocate a half a day. So that's exactly what happened. Half a day playing this game, Team One was a huge success. But what we've also done, which was also a fantastic idea that taught me something, which was to quantify your improvement. So what they did is they could eventually say, with quite some certainty, that just in that day alone, they solved 16,000 euros worth of issues. So capacity that was always otherwise spent on um, additional tests that had to be done because the bugs that have been there for 2 years already, they're never being fixed, and so forth. So because they quantified just that, at the end of those 4 hours, we had energized teams, we had fixed issues, and we had proof that taking time for improvement um, has a monetary value. And before you know it, people were like, you know what, let's do that again next quarter. It first started with those 4 hours, and after that, it became 8 hours. So it became one day. So we have a 1 day IP iteration, sort of. Um, After that, it became a week where much more improvement happened. There was knowledge sharing that was done for onboarding new people, and so forth and so forth. Well, lo and behold, eventually it became within that company, it became something that was got a name. It was called a sort of imagine a train platform. A train sort of arrives at the train platform and it stops for a bit and then eventually it goes again. So they generated the platform week, and that became for some trains it became 2 weeks. For other trains, they remained for 1 week. Fan of that, but still. Um, and that had a fantastic effect on the retention. People were burnt out. Let me just less. The retention rate was went up, so people stayed. There were improvements. Got the feeling that they do something about it, and that rhythmic moment, forcing yourself to improve using a gamified method. A wonderful, wonderful idea coming from.
So, if I kind of play back what have I heard, get creative about how you inspire 'em. Don't ask for the world, ask for a little bit.
Exactly.
Get some data and build momentum. And use the data on the impact of the little bit to get a little bit more. So, I'm going to kind of run the same thread, perhaps with a couple of questions as I did with Stephan. I think about scale, right? So at this point, you've got scale, which is some teams and an art. And, what do I know? Some teams in an art can make a certain level of improvement, and then they start running into some brick walls. And there are some things that have to shift elsewhere in the organization. And, I was talking to a group of Scrum Masters about it this week. There was an analogy used by Ahmed Sidki about change that I loved a number of years ago. And he said, look, you can look at an organization and go, there's different parts of the organization. And there's do you say rubber band or elastic band in Europe? Like a rubber band or an elastic band?
Elastic band,
elastic,
rubber
right?
band, both.
So if you imagine you've got a set of blocks being the different parts of the organization or the different parts of the way you work, and they're all held together in an elastic band, you can lean in to generate change on one of those blocks, and it can start to move, but as it moves, it stretches the band out. And the further it becomes out of alignment to the other pieces, the harder it is to move the band, and potentially that the band eventually snaps. And you've got to recognize I move some change here, and then I've got to pick another block, and I've got to move some of the other blocks before I can keep moving that first block further. And I think for me, this is part of the sensing of, where am I focused and when is it time to shift focus? But one of the things I think about with scale is that scale, you've got access to blocks that teams and arts never have. But it's a different question when you try and mobilize a relentless improvement at scale. So over to you, Ali. Great story about teams and an art. When you're trying to approach relentless improvement at different levels of scale, what are some of the things that differ for you in your approach?
I don't know. I tend to like the prove it first approach. I think what you just mentioned, Mark, which is I think something that you need to copyright as well, sort of change elasticity or something like that. Copyright, Mark. 24.
No, just cheerfully plagiarized.
If nobody knows, it's fine. I think proving that something works, even though it has been done on a very small scale first, somehow tend to work for me, because in our world, we talk a lot. There are a lot of people that talk a lot, and you're trying to experience and take people along a sort of a trail of thought. But that sometimes is nothing more than words. And people tend to be careful with advisors that are just sharing words and no data. And of course, because there's a lot of people that are just talking too much and bluffing themselves through their professional life. So proving that something works has a different effect, because if you can just share with a group of people that is skeptical that their own colleagues have been doing this for the last half a year with success. And by the way, let me take you to your own colleagues that have been doing this with success. Of course, they went through a journey of trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work, and so on and so forth. But there is the proof, and the proof even has names that pop up into your to input field in your Outlook. So that's your colleagues. You've been emailing with them. You've been talking with them. There's proof there that something works, and trying to find a way to start very small, have a little bit of proof, if I can call it like that, and scaling that from there, I think is what I at least find very important in the work that we do.
Okay.
I highly second that, Ali. Showing stuff that proves, and one of my experience I made, and I'm repeating that more and more. I call it the sandpit effect. Like in an inspect and adapt event, we are taught the whole art has to participate. We were preparing one of these problem-solving workshops, and the coaches said, "Hey, some people don't want to attend." And we said, "Okay, don't force them. Take those who can attribute to a problem, who are able to go into the ring and do the stuff." And we organized this problem solving like a circus arena. We said, okay, these are the guys who will contribute. These are the teams. All the others, you might join, but if you join, you're a guest, you just observe. And some of the coaches, like the RTs, the team coaches, they were in the arena with the teams. And we had a few people, me included, as observers. As soon as somebody joined as a guest, we talked to them. And I remember Yuval Yeret, one of the SAFe fellows, wrote a guidance article about invitation-based implementation. That's what we did, right? We invited people, and we had some senior managers joining quickly. They listened and they said, "Yeah, what they're doing here and the thoughts, I would do it differently." And I said, "Okay, here's the rule: you're a guest, you're not talking. If you want to contribute, go into the arena." And this sandpit effect worked. He entered the arena and he was part of it. Didn't have to force him, right? So making something working and proving it works, and others just let them be in the sandpit. I want to build a castle as well. I don't have the tools. How do I get it, right? So back to your question, Mark, how do I use that on different levels? I even use that with senior management. The sandpit effect works even on that level, right? Hey, my mate in the executive board has something called a Kanban system, high visibility, transparency. I don't have it. I want it too. Can I have it? And then you're in the game and you say, no, you don't want a Kanban system. What's the problem to be solved again? So systems thinking for me is the overall umbrella here when it comes to relentless improvement. Thinking in different abstraction layers or in different contexts, but the overall picture is clear. And that relates to what you just told us from the Toyota production system. Sometimes they are really ruthless, telling you, hey, that's really crap what you do here. We only give you a little bit of the view, or we give you an overall view, work with us and explore and evolve over the time.
All right, so final question for Ali before we head into the kind of wrapping segments of the episode. If you think back across your journey as a coach, Ali, and you go, there were moments in your life that changed your effectiveness or the toolkit that you had to inspire change. If you had to pick one or two moments that really just uplifted your ability to coach into relentless improvement, what would they be?
Let's. I think. No, I know. I figured out that people are extremely busy all the time, and um, giving people the tools, guidance they could just follow, which brings them, which guides them through, I don't know, planning, improvement, adjustment, reflection, just having a clear, over-engineered template that shows them exactly how they are doing. Think about a dashboard and a process around the dashboard on how to use it. You could see it as an extremely elaborate, over-engineered inspect and adapt format, an agenda with, this is what we do at that moment, and then for each person, each role, their own little section, an over-engineered agenda really worked because it meant that whenever we started using that, meant that the moment that somebody, let me rephrase, the moment that an inspect and adapt would start, everyone knew exactly their role. Everyone knew exactly where to look at, where they could find certain types of data. And by keeping that relatively stable over time, the entire ceremony of an inspect and adapt, which can be very chaotic, became a rhythm, became a routine in which they knew exactly what data to look at to understand how we were performing, um, the what type of steps to take in order to identify the best possible solution item to focus on, and how to measure that over time. And it just figured out that, yeah, well, what I can do as a coach that is apparently very helpful to people is to together over engineer the process in a way, so that the moment that we have a large group of people collaborating, in this case in inspect and adapt, um, they would they are guided by the over engineered process. They're guided by the tools that have been set up for them, so that they can directly jump into um, solutioning mode. And yeah, that's it did something with the way I worked ever since. I've been making templates, over engineered PI plannings, and over engineered system demos, and it works really nice.
All right. So, kind of moving towards the closeout sequence. The next
Yeah.
segment is the just one sentence challenge, where we set ourselves a challenge last time to perhaps maybe a little bit more than a sentence, but not kind of 30, 45 seconds. I'm going to kick in, and I've actually, as we've talked, I've changed my mind about what my just one sentence is. And my one sentence is, it's not about what happens in the workshop, it's about what happens after the workshop. And the tools you need are not the tools in the workshop, they're the tools you need for after the workshop. And it's pretty hard to go wrong with the improvement kata and structured PDCA cycles. We'll bring Nico in, even though he's in Disneyland. His just one sentence was, don't get lazy and rest on your success. Over to you, Stephan.
Yeah, my one sentence is, don't train and improve until you get it right. Train and improve until you don't get it wrong. That's relentless.
And Ali?
Mine was, market your improvement attempts, in brackets. Market your improvement attempts as much as and as quantifiable as, so basically scream and shout that you've done good things.
So that gives me an interesting segue, right? Because our closing segment is looking at measure and grow, and the 7 or 8 things that are in measure and grow to do with relentless improvement. We have a competition to go pick the one that you have to pick, right? If you're going to measure, just focus on just one thing. What's that one thing? And Nico's not here, so his vote doesn't count. And we're left with both Stephan and I very much oriented towards data, right? Facts and data over opinions and conjecture. And my personal amplification of that is the facts and data about the problem to be solved, and the facts and data about the difference you made. You've got to baseline it, you've got to measure the impact, and then you've got to be able to market the impact and learn from it. And I've heard you talk about measure, marketing so many times over the course of this episode, Ali, but you voted for the organization gives improvement activities priority, visibility, and resources.
Yes, it's me against the two of you, which is just a suicidal act. Yeah, that's it. I can't win against the two of you. Come on.
Come on,
No,
convince us. Go for it, Ali. Go.
Sway us.
Oh my God. Okay, sway. I've chosen for something else. I've chosen for the organization gives improvement activities priority, visibility, and reach. Because if that one wasn't in the list, I would have gone exactly as the two of you would have gone for the data route. So making improvement decisions as much as possible using um, real life insights and data. But you need to have the ability to improve. There needs to be some form of acceptance across the board in a certain context to be able to spend time and have people around spending time on improving. And without that, the data, I mean, have the data, you might still not be able to spend the time to improve. Or even if you have an improvement, you've thought of something that is quantifiable, but you cannot get it across outside of your train. So I found I f- there needs to be some form of people just need to listen and should be able to join into um, improvement. And if that's not there, then data or no data, willingness from teams or no willingness not not improve. It's very, or at least very difficult to do so. Hence my choice.
So I'm just going to test you, right? And
Bring it on.
here's my test. If you think about your game of Risk, right? You are actually in a train or an art or an organization that wouldn't give improvement activities priority, visibility, and resources. And you found a half a day and you sold half a day somehow, right? You went for something where you had a good argument to go, it wouldn't be spent any better somewhere else. And then you got some data out of it that said we solved this many defects and it saved us this many euro a month. And then you got more priority, more visibility, and more resources. And this is what threaded through my head as I was looking at this list, because I think I changed my vote 3 times. I think getting that visibility, getting the resources, getting it ingrained in the culture, giving people time and equipment, running experiments, building the momentum to really have that be done is about getting results and building on the momentum of the results you've got. And that's why I kept going back to data, because I think I just see so many people, they get given time, they make changes and they can't explain them. And then the improvement time goes away. Right.
Yep.
So I completely agree with you about the importance of the priority, right? It is a chicken and egg. You've got to get a little bit of time. But that's where I thought you had a great story of get a little bit of time, do something good with it, market it, get a little bit more time. And maybe it's the combination, right? Yes, it needs priority.
Well, so the data gives you more acceptance, more ability, more priority from others, more resources as well. But if you don't have the data yet, then what happened in my situation was the scrum masters were like, well, but we were way too busy, but wait a second, oh, this sounds actually quite nice. And they made some time without having data yet. So it's a chicken and egg problem, unfortunately. I think we're both right.
Maybe I can solve it a little bit here. My coach,
Please.
First time we met, he said, okay, you hop on the bike and we have a test with you. Without data, I don't have a starting point. And without the data every 3 weeks, I can't adapt and adjust the training sessions or the training plan. I just handing out you some hints with some content, but I'm not sure if you're eating the right stuff.
That's right. We're not asking you to give up, Ali. Because I think if you think about the listener, right, and the listener says what's important, it's both, right? Get data, get priority and time. Use it wisely and get more data. Go back for more priority and more time, right? And maybe it's not a chicken and egg problem, but a virtuous cycle.
I guess so. Yeah.
And that concludes episode 8, Relentless Improvement. So
Nice. I mean,
much as we did
can you-
last
with two
time,
copyrighted statements.
copyrighted
So,
plagiarized
okay.
statements.
Change elasticity and the sandpit effect. God, this episode is